I'm here at ChillerCon, the horror convention in beautiful Scarborough, in the Royal Hotel, where I'm joined by Gemma Amor, who you might know for Dear Laura, White Pines, and soon to be released, Full Immersion. Gemma, how are you enjoying ChillerCon so far?
It's good. It's an experience. I have not long come back from ChillerCon, which was in Denver, in Colorado.
How does it compare to Scarborough?
It's a very different vibe, but it's very British. It's got a very uniquely British feel to it. So yeah, I'm having a good time. It's always nice to put actual faces to avatars that you've only ever spoken to on Twitter, and hugs and conversations and drinks in the real world are. They're really invigorating. I've written a lot more this year than I've written for a long time, and I think most of that is down to being able to do conventions again and meet people again, and people that share the same interests and passions and things.
It's inspiring. It's
really inspiring. It kicks things loose, it gets things going, it gets the gears going. So I'm loving every minute of it, but I'm really tired.
And it's only the second day, so...
It is only the second day, yeah. So.
One of the things that people will want to talk to you about is your upcoming novel, Full Immersion.
Sure.
What can you tell us about that? What's it about?
So, Full Immersion is, it's... How do I describe it? I know you're not supposed to flounder when it comes to describing a book. So I would say it's a autobiographical virtual reality mystery thriller with elements of horror, magical realism, and other stuff thrown in. It's a book, it's very personal to me. It's a book that I wrote never really expecting it to see the light of day or to get it published. I wrote it when I was very unwell, mentally unwell. I was unemployed, I was in a particularly bad place in my life, and it coincided with my son starting school, so not only was I unemployed, I suddenly had lots of time on my hands. And I have been trying to write and finish books my entire life, ever since I was a kid. And you know how it goes when you have a job and, you know, other responsibilities, the writing quite often doesn't take as much of a front seat as it needs to for you to finish a project. So here I was all of a sudden with an opportunity, and I developed a lovely routine where I would get up in the morning and I'd drop my kid off at school and I'd walk down to the street and plonk myself in my favourite coffee shop and just write from 9 until 1 every day. And it meant that before I knew it, I had a book in my hands. It wasn't a very good book. It wasn't anything that anybody would want to read, but it kick-started, I guess, my ability to sit down and write every day, which I think is very important in this game. And then fast forward a couple of years, I had some interest from a publisher called Angry Robot, who asked me if I had any novel-length projects, and I thought, well, actually, I think I probably do. So I sat down, I looked at what I'd written, I rewrote large chunks of it, and I sent it to them, and yeah, the rest is history. So
when you call it partly autobiographical, what personal experiences are you drawing on for this story?
Mostly my experience with postnatal depression. I was very poorly. It was quite a delayed illness for me, so my son was probably about 2 when I started to feel not quite right. I then went on a very long journey of not really understanding what was happening to me. Lots of self-destructive behaviour and some really dark moments that I desperately needed to work through. So I kind of did therapy and medication, but I would say the most helpful thing for me was to organise my thoughts about it all in the form of a book. So it draws heavily on that experience, on my past, it's also an exploration of therapy in a way, because the protagonist, although she doesn't know it, is taking part in an experimental therapy program via a virtual reality setting. So she is being treated in a very abstract way, and that helped me to also sort out my feelings to how I felt about being in therapy. So yeah, it's really intensely personal. I think hopefully not many of my readers will know that when they read it, what specifically is about me and what isn't, but I know.
But at the same time, I mean, how does it feel to be presenting something so personal
Yeah,
to
terrifying.
the world. Really.
Terrifying. I'm terrified for this one. Like
Wow.
I've brought out several books now. I think this is maybe book 7,
Mm-hmm.
6 or 7. And in fiction, I always put an element of myself in there anyway. There's always a character who's based on someone I know, or there's a story based on an experience that I've had, but never as personal and on such an intense level as this. And I am actually really frightened because I worry, my readers won't think it's perhaps horror enough, or friends who know me might take issue with reading things that are in there, or it's a very vulnerable position to be in, and it's also my first traditionally published book, so the pressure is on a little bit to make sure it performs well, and I'm not sure how I feel about that, how I feel about commercialising my own experience. So yeah, it's a very complicated, vulnerable time for me at the moment.
On the subject, you have been predominantly a self-published author
Yeah.
up until now, very successfully, it should be said. But how have you found the experience so far of going through a traditional publisher?
I mean, it's worlds away. So I would say that I've been equal parts self-published and indie published up until now. So kind of the smaller punk rock indie publishers. I love working with them. And in that respect, everything is so fast and so snappy and so quick, and you can, you could literally make a deal and sign a deal with an indie pub in a matter of hours. I know because I have. Traditional publishing, on the other hand, is a very long, slow game, so you have to bear that in mind. Even just signing the contract can take months and months and months because they have legal departments and teams, and there's an agent involved, so the more people there are, the longer it takes. That being said, one of the main reasons I wanted, twofold. I wanted to work in traditional publishing for 2 reasons. One, I wanted to reach more English readers, because UK readers, because up until now I think the majority of my readers are based in the US, which I love, and I love, they're brilliant. They're my bread and butter. But I was aware that I haven't really connected with a UK readership yet, and I think part of that is because UK readers do tend more towards the traditional side of things, the bookshop side, the Waterstones, So I knew I needed to make some inroads there, and traditional publishing would help with that. But more specifically, I wanted, because I'm still a new writer, really. I've only been doing this properly since sort of 2018, and I've got so much to learn. And I wanted to work with an editorial team. I wanted to work with a publicist. I just wanted to learn much more about the craft. And so in the process of doing this book, I think I've read the damn thing about 9 times now over for various different edits. And every time you think, oh, this is done, then there's a proof edit that comes back, and so, which I would say is a slight note of caution for anyone writing something intensely personal. If you're going down the traditionally published route, there is a good chance you will have to relive your trauma over and over and over again whilst you're getting that book good, which is something I spoke to Gabino Iglesias about at StokerCon as well. I hadn't fully appreciated the depth of which I would have to go back and replumb my own pain. But the team at Angry Robot have been fantastic. They've been sensitive, they've been diligent. I feel like we've made a good book between us, and so the traditional experience has been very, very different to what I'm used to. It's been very slow, very meticulous. I'm quite a slapdash sort of person. That's been hard for me, but I have also enjoyed it, so I feel like I have a good understanding of a fair number of different types of publishing now, and it's a good journey.
So do you intend to continue with self-publishing and indie publishing as well?
Well, I mean, I have an agent now, so there's very little I can actually self-publish at the moment, before he gets cross, because everything I write he wants, which is, fair. So having said that, I do have relationships with indie publishers still that I value and nurture, and there's an understanding between all of us. So I have a book coming out with Cemetery Gates Media next year, provisionally entitled Thomas, but we might change that to the Once Yellow House. They're great people to work with, and I don't want to let that relationship go. So I think it's going to be a mix of, hopefully, fingers crossed, traditional publishing and indie going forward. I would like to continue self-publishing. I still have books under my Amazon profile. The revenue from that will hopefully keep coming in. I'd like to explore that more, but it has to be within the bounds of what my agent's comfortable with. So, yeah.
You had quite an interesting route into publishing fiction. You started with audio.
Yes,
Or what drew you into the audio world?
My first published story, I guess, was a story that the No Sleep podcast adapted in 2018 called His Life's Work, about a mad scientist who opens a portal to hell in his laboratory in his terraced house in the middle of Bristol. And it was the first time that anyone had paid me for my writing. Well, not the first time, but the first time anyone had paid me for fiction. And it made me realise I could write stories and get paid for them. So it was a huge confidence booster for me. I built up a very good relationship with them very quickly. And then they kept adapting my stories, and I kept writing them, because short stories are a brilliant entryway into fiction as a whole. And it really taught me a lot about storytelling, taught me a lot to hone the craft and the payoff and the hook and all the things that you need in a short story to make it as solid as possible. And then before I knew it, I had a collection of maybe like 10, 12 stories, and I just thought, well, I should probably publish this. So I met a very small indie publisher, self-publisher really, through that.
Yeah.
He put the book out. I then, after about 6 months, took the rights to that book back and published it myself, and it just went from there really. I had a readership through No Sleep, and it just built and built. So I was very fortunate really to have that. Yeah.
Is there an effectiveness to audio horror in particular that perhaps people don't realise if they haven't written it or listened to it?
I think what No Sleep do particularly well is that they don't just do a straight reading. They have professional voice actors, they have professional audio editors and sound effects teams, they have a composer who scores everything individually. So you have the soundtrack for your story essentially. It is top-notch kind of ear movie stuff, and it just brings a story to life in a way that I think is very unique and very special, and that's why I think it's had over like 200 million downloads now. So it's doing very well.
If there's a particular audio episode or story or podcast episode of yours that you would recommend to check out?
I think the one that people tend to like the most and talk about the most, there's two that I would recommend. My story Foliage is a 1 hour special. It's about an odd job man who has to go and help a young woman who's inherited a house from her grandparents and it's overrun with vines. He has to help her kind of clean the house out. That's a very popular one. And then they also adapted Dear Laura into a 6-part audio special. I adapted it for them, which is quite different to the book in a number of ways, and it isn't as well. And it's fantastic, and I think they did such an incredible job. So I would say start with Foliage and then move on to Dear Laura.
Okay, well, I'll definitely be doing that. And I recommend everyone else checks out Full Immersion when it
comes out, September the 13th.
September 13th. Gemma, thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you.